The silence hit Elias Boone harder than a gunshot. For 15 years, he had lived on this land, and he knew every sound by heart: the lowing of cattle, the restless shift of horses in their stalls, the caw of crows circling overhead. But that morning, nothing stirred. Not a hoof, not a wing, not even the steady crow of his rooster. The stillness felt unnatural, like the prairie itself was holding its breath. Elias stepped off his porch, boots crunching dry earth, his hand instinctively brushing the butt of the revolver on his hip. His ranch was modest: broken fences, a sagging barn, a few half-starved cattle that hadn't yet been sold to pay his debts. He had weathered droughts, blizzards, and hunger, but this silence unnerved him in a way no storm ever had. The barn doors loomed ahead, weather-beaten oak swollen with years of sun and rain. He gripped the iron latch, half expecting a coyote or maybe a cougar had slipped inside. With a grunt, he shoved them open, light spilling into the dusty gloom. What he saw stopped him cold. Two figures stirred in the shadows, crouched low against the far wall. Women, but not like any women he had ever seen. Both were giants, easily 6.5 feet tall, shoulders broad as wagon beams, their faces marked with striking swirls of black and red paint. Their clothing hung in tatters, torn and blood-stained, and their feet were bound in strips of cloth that had once been moccasins. They watched him with a predator's stillness, defiant, exhausted, and yet unafraid. One of them, the elder, rose to her full height, towering over him like a living pillar. Her dark eyes locked onto his. "Please," she said in accented English, her hands raised in peace. "We need only shelter until nightfall. Then we will leave." The second woman, her sister by the resemblance in her high cheekbones and piercing gaze, moved forward swiftly, her calloused hand gripping Elias's forearm. "Listen," she whispered. At first he heard nothing. Then his blood turned cold. From outside came the faint creak of leather, the restless snort of horses, the shuffle of moccasined feet on dry earth. He froze. Through the cracks in the barn wall, he saw them. Shadows shifting among the cottonwoods, eyes glinting from behind the rocks. Not a handful. Dozens. Warriors, their faces painted for war. The elder woman's voice was steady, but low. "They followed us. We thought we lost them in the canyon." Elias's throat tightened. "Who are they?" "Warriors of Chief Dakota," she replied. "We were his prisoners. We escaped 3 nights ago." Her sister touched the leather pouch tied at her waist. "We carry something he wants. Something that could start a war, or end one." Outside, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The warriors were moving closer, encircling the ranch like wolves. Elias's grip tightened on his revolver, though he knew 12 bullets would do little against 60 seasoned fighters. The elder woman looked at him again, her voice heavy with both warning and gratitude. "I am Ayana. This is my sister, Kamama. We are daughters of Chief Nalish of the White Mountain Apache. We came to you because you are the only settler in this valley who has shown our people kindness." Elias Boone, a rancher with nothing but debt and dust to his name, suddenly understood the truth. He hadn't been chosen by accident. He had been delivered into the center of something far larger than himself, and nothing, not his land, not his cattle, not even his own life, would ever be the same again. The drumming reached Elias's ears before he saw the flames, slow, steady, like a heartbeat echoing through the soil itself. The two towering sisters walked in silence, carrying him as though he were no heavier than a sack of grain. His feet never touched the ground. His pride stung worse than the bruises on his ribs. When they finally stopped, the smell of wood smoke filled his lungs. Elias blinked into the clearing and saw a sight that made his knees go weak. A great circle of Apache men and women sat cross-legged around a roaring fire, their faces painted in stark patterns of red, black, and white. They were not the ragged, defeated people Elias had sometimes glimpsed near the reservation road. These were warriors, elders, and leaders, their posture radiating strength that made him feel small, even before they set him on his feet. At the center stood Chief Nalish, feathers of eagle and hawk rising from his headdress, his weathered face carved with lines of wisdom and authority. His gaze was unreadable as he studied Elias. "Ayana, Kamama," the chief intoned, his voice low, but carrying across the circle like distant thunder. "You have brought him." The older sister stepped forward, her voice calm and sure. "We have watched this man, Chief. Elias Boone. He is poor, but he is honest. He has given when he had nothing to spare. He is not like the others." Kamama added softly, "We saw him feed hungry children in the winter. We saw him treat his animals with mercy. He has a good heart, even when the world shows him none." The words struck Elias like hammer blows. He had never spoken of those moments to anyone. They were small, private acts he thought went unnoticed. Yet here he was, laid bare before an entire council. Chief Nalish raised a hand. The circle fell silent. "Elias Boone, these sisters have chosen you. In our way, when women of standing choose a man, the council must test if the union will strengthen our people. There will be 3 trials, of strength, of wisdom, and of courage. If you succeed, you will not only wed Ayana and Kamama, you will become one of us. If you fail—" The chief paused, letting the words hang in the smoky air. "You will leave this valley forever." Elias's mouth went dry. Marriage? Adoption into their people? It sounded impossible, almost laughable. Yet every painted face around the fire looked at him with deadly seriousness. I'm no warrior," he stammered. "I'm just a rancher who can barely keep cattle alive." Ayana's dark eyes locked onto his. "That is why we chose you. You know loss. You know struggle. Our people need more than warriors. They need men who understand sacrifice." Before Elias could answer, 2 young men stepped forward carrying a massive oak staff, polished smooth by many hands. They laid it at his feet. "The trial of strength," Chief Nalish announced. "Break it with your bare hands." The staff was thick, solid heartwood, stronger than iron. Elias stared at it, then at the circle of silent faces. Sweat prickled his brow. Break it? He couldn't even split oak that size with an axe without effort. His fingers trembled as he lifted the staff, heavy and unyielding. Ayana stepped close, her whisper barely audible above the crackle of flames. "Strength without wisdom is nothing. Find its weakness." Her sister's voice followed, calm and steady. "Every strong thing has a place where it breaks. See it, and you will know how." Elias swallowed hard, running his calloused fingers along the staff until he found a small knot where a branch had once grown. He braced it across his knee, pressed down with all his weight. For a long moment, nothing happened. The chant of the council rose, a deep, throbbing rhythm. His arms shook, his teeth clenched. Crack! The staff split in 2. Gasps echoed through the circle. Elias staggered, chest heaving, sweat stinging his eyes. Chief Nalish nodded once. "1 trial complete. 2 remain." But not all faces looked approving. Across the fire, a scarred warrior rose to his feet, his voice cold with challenge. "This white man cannot protect his own land. He will not protect ours. The trial of wisdom was about to begin, and Elias knew the hardest test lay ahead. The scarred warrior's challenge lingered in the air like smoke after lightning. His name was Tahoe, Elias soon learned, a fighter whose reputation stretched across the territory. When he spoke, even the council listened. "This rancher has nothing," Tahoe growled, his scar catching the firelight. "He brings weakness, not strength. Let him prove otherwise, or send him back to his dying land." Chief Nalish lifted his hand, silencing the murmurs. "He will face the next trial, the trial of wisdom." An elderly woman stepped from the shadows, her back bent but her eyes sharp as flint. She carried a leather pouch, worn smooth from years of use. Kneeling before Elias, she spilled its contents onto the packed earth. Bones carved with shapes, smooth river stones, and small pieces of painted wood tumbled across the ground. Each was etched with symbols: animals, rivers, storms, and... "These are the sacred pieces of our people," the chief said. "They hold the stories of who we are. You must arrange them into a tale that shows you understand what it means to be Apache." Elias's stomach dropped. He knew nothing of their stories, nothing of their heritage beyond whispers and rumor. His hands hovered uselessly over the pieces. "I don't know your ways," he admitted, voice hoarse. "I'm no storyteller." Kamama crouched beside him, her presence grounding him. Her voice was soft, meant for him alone. "Then tell our story, the one that brought you here tonight." Elias glanced at her, uncertain. "Our story?" Ayana joined her sister, her tall frame casting a protective shadow. "Yes, the story of two women who saw worth in a man others dismissed." Elias looked back at the scattered pieces. Slowly, deliberately, he began to place them. A carved horsebone for his ranch, struggling but stubborn. Two larger stones for Ayana and Kamama, unmoving anchors. A circle of wood to represent the council. And at the center, he set a small eagle feather, delicate, yet strong. "My story begins with failure," Elias said, voice steadying as the circle leaned in. "A man who believed he had nothing left. He was seen by two women, not for his weakness, but for the strength he had forgotten. Together, they brought him before their people not as a thief or an enemy, but as a bridge." The council was silent, eyes fixed on the pattern forming in the dirt. Elias hesitated, then added one last piece, a carved wolf. He placed it beside the eagle feather. "A man alone is lost, but a man who becomes part of something greater. He can find a new name, a new life." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Tahoe stepped forward, his voice like grinding stone. "Pretty words," he spat, and with a swift kick, he scattered the pieces across the dirt. Gasps rose from the circle. Ayana moved instantly, standing between Tahoe and Elias, her face fierce. "Touch them again," she warned, her voice low and deadly, "and you answer to me." For the first time, Elias saw a flicker of hesitation in the scarred warrior's eyes. He stepped back, but his glare promised the challenge was far from over. Chief Nalish gestured for Elias to rebuild the story. With trembling hands, Elias arranged the pieces again. But this time, he overlapped two circles, one for his world, one for theirs, with the eagle feather and wolf in the space where they met. "The sacrifice," Elias said firmly, "isn't giving up who I was. It's becoming something new, belonging to both worlds, limited by neither." The old woman nodded, her face softening. Chief Nalish studied the pattern, then spoke. "You have wisdom, Elias Boone, but wisdom without courage is nothing. The final trial begins now." The circle shifted, widening. From the darkness came heavy footsteps, deliberate and menacing. Elias's blood turned to ice. "Prepare yourself," Ayana whispered. "The trial of courage is combat." The chanting stopped. Silence stretched over the fire circle as the crowd parted, leaving a wide space of bare earth. Elias felt his heartbeat in his throat. Every face around him, painted in firelight, was watching to see if he would rise or crumble. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. At first, Elias thought it might be another warrior like Tahoe. But as the man entered the firelight, recognition hit like a blow. Boone Carter. The wealthy rancher who had tormented Elias for years looked nothing like the polished land baron from town. His fine shirt was torn. His boots caked with dust, and his eyes burned with fury. A hunting knife gleamed in his hand, long and wickedly sharp. "You," Elias whispered. His palms grew clammy, but his grip tightened on the knife Chief Nalish handed him. Carter sneered. "Didn't expect me, did you, Ward? Thought you could steal what was mine without consequence?" "What are you talking about?" Elias asked, confusion mingling with fear. "Them," Carter snapped, pointing at Ayana and Kamama. "I made a deal. 50 head of cattle for both sisters as wives. A fair exchange that would have made me the most powerful man in this territory. And then the chief tells me his women made their own choice. Chose you." Gasps rippled through the council. Nalish's expression hardened. "There was no such agreement. Our daughters are not cattle to be traded." Carter laughed bitterly. "Tell that to your precious council. These women belong to whoever can pay, or take them, and I intend to take them back." Ayana's eyes flashed like steel. "We were never yours, Boone Carter. We choose for ourselves, and we chose him." The firelight threw Carter's face into sharp relief. Sweat, rage, and desperation etched into every line. "Then let's finish this," he snarled. Chief Nalish raised his hand. "The trial of courage is combat to submission, not to death, but to prove who holds the right to stand beside my daughters. Winner stays. Loser leaves this territory forever." The knives gleamed. The air turned heavy with expectation. Carter lunged first, his blade slashing through empty air as Elias dodged back. The bigger man's movements were fueled by whiskey and anger, wild, reckless, but dangerous. Sparks flew as their knives clashed. Carter pressed forward, snarling curses, while Elias gave ground, his lean frame darting in and out of reach. "You can't even keep your cattle alive," Carter spat. "What makes you think you deserve them? Because I don't see them as property," Elias shot back, circling. "I see them as people to be earned." The words struck harder than any blade. Ayana and Kamama's faces softened with pride, while Carter only grew more enraged. He charged again, his knife arcing high. Elias ducked beneath, using the man's momentum to shove him into the dirt. Carter rolled, gasping, but Elias was already on him, knife pressed to his throat. The fire roared in the silence. Carter's eyes widened with the realization he'd lost. "Yield," Elias demanded, his voice steady. Carter spat, tried to twist, but the Apache Council was watching, unblinking. The weight of their judgment pressed down like iron. Finally, his shoulders slumped. "I yield." Chief Nalish stepped forward. "The trial is complete. Elias Boone has shown strength, wisdom, and courage, and mercy when he might have taken vengeance. By our law, he has earned his place." Ayana and Kamama moved to Elias's side, their presence like twin pillars of strength. For the first time in years, Elias didn't feel small or forgotten. He felt chosen. The fire crackled, carrying the chief's next words into the night. "Rise, Elias Boone. From this night, You are not only husband to my daughters, but son to our people." Dawn broke across the valley, streaking the sky with pale orange and violet. Elias Boone stood on the ridge, overlooking what had once been his failing ranch. For years, the land had mocked him. Dry soil, withered crops, fences falling apart faster than he could mend them. But this morning, everything looked different. Apache families worked the fields below, moving with quiet efficiency. Rows of corn and beans had already begun to sprout, planted using ancient methods that conserved water and fed the soil. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the sound of children laughing echoed across the open space where silence had once haunted him. Ayana appeared at his side, carrying a woven basket filled with herbs. Her presence was as steady as the land itself. "The cattle arrived this morning," she said, her voice low but confident. 40 head, just as we bargained with the traders." Elias nodded, marveling at how effortlessly she spoke of plans that stretched months into the future. Plans he was now a part of. He no longer stood alone against hunger and debt. He was part of something larger. "Where's Kamama?" he asked. Ayana's lips curved in a faint smile. "Teaching the children. She says if our people are to deal with settlers and their papers, they must learn to read the words used against us." The thought made Elias grin. Kamama's fiery determination balanced Ayana's quiet strategy. Together, the sisters had woven him into their world with a patience and strength he could never have imagined. Still, the transformation hadn't come without its weight. Elias had been given a new name, Neshoba, the wolf. It carried with it respect and responsibility. Tribal elders expected him to act as a bridge between two worlds, a role few men could bear. Every decision he made now reflected not just on himself, but on the people who had adopted him. Later that day, he walked through the bustling camp. Warriors repaired tack and weapons. Women prepared food. Children darted through the fields. Everywhere he turned, people greeted him, not with suspicion anymore, but with nods of recognition. Some even used his Apache name, testing how it fit on their tongues. Yet not all hearts were convinced. He felt eyes on him from the shadows. Tahoe, the scarred warrior who had doubted him from the beginning. Though he had accepted the outcome of the trials, his stare was still sharp, a silent reminder that Elias's place here would always need proving. As the sun dipped low, Elias joined Ayana and Kamama at the council fire. Chief Nalish stood before them, his eagle feather headdress glowing in the firelight. "Tonight we speak of trade," the chief said. "Settlers seek food, cattle, and land. We must decide what we give and what we hold." Elias listened, heart pounding. A month ago, he'd been a man scraping for survival. Now, he sat among leaders, his voice invited in matters that would shape the future of two peoples. When the debate grew heated, Kamama leaned close and whispered, "This is what you were chosen for. Not just us, but all of us." Elias looked into the fire, remembering the man he had been. Lonely, small, invisible. Now, against all odds, he was part of a family, a tribe, and a destiny larger than anything he had ever dared to dream. 2 weeks later, Elias Boone rode into the town of Silverton with Ayana and Kamama at his side. He hadn't set foot here since the trials, and the sight of weathered storefronts and dust-choked streets felt like stepping into another life. Once, he had been just another broke rancher passing through for supplies he could barely afford. Now, he entered as a man bound to a people the town feared and misunderstood. Eyes followed them instantly. Men lounging on the porch of the saloon froze with their cards in midair. Women carrying baskets pulled their children close, whispering. The Boone name still meant little here, but his companions, the towering Apache sisters, were impossible to ignore. Sheriff Morton emerged from his office, his hand resting casually on the butt of his revolver. "Elias," he called, voice edged with suspicion. "Word is you've thrown in with Nalish's people. That true?" Elias dismounted slowly, keeping his movements calm. "I've thrown in with honesty, Sheriff. The tribe saved me when no one else cared to. I stand with them." The sheriff's gaze slid to Ayana and Kamama, then back to Elias. "Some folks don't see it that way. Rumor says the Apache are stockpiling arms, readying for raids." Kamama's jaw tightened, but Ayana laid a steadying hand on her arm. "We stockpile food," Ayana said coolly. "For winter, not war. But lies spread faster than truth." At that moment, Vernon Briggs strode out of the general store. His presence was like a spark in dry grass. "There he is," Briggs barked. "The rancher who betrayed his own kind. You think hiding behind savages makes you a man, Boone?" The crowd murmured, edging closer. Elias felt his throat tighten, but he forced his voice steady. "I think protecting the innocent makes me a man. You wanted power, Vernon, and the tribe wouldn't sell their daughters to buy it. That's the truth." Briggs's face purpled with rage. "You'll pay for siding against your own. Mark my words. When the settlers rise up, you'll hang first." Sheriff Morton raised a hand. "Enough. There'll be no fighting in my town." But his warning carried little weight. The tension was a storm cloud ready to burst. Back at camp that night, Elias sat with the council as warriors spoke of the danger. Tahoe argued for preemptive strikes, his scar catching firelight as he leaned forward. "Better to cut out a snake's fangs before it bites," he growled. Ayana countered, her voice calm but firm. "Violence now only proves their lies. We need allies among the settlers, not enemies." All eyes turned to Elias. For the first time, his opinion could tip the balance between peace and war. He swallowed hard, knowing every word mattered. If we fight now, Briggs wins. He wants fear to drive settlers against you. But if we can prove his lies, if we can show fairness in trade and strength in unity, we'll win something bigger than a battle. We'll win trust. The council murmured, divided. Tahoe's glare burned holes in Elias's back, but Ayana and Kamama's quiet support anchored him. Chief Nalish finally raised his hand. "Then the trial is not over, Elias Boone. Your test continues. Bring proof of peace, or prepare for war." The fire crackled between them, throwing sparks into the dark. Elias realized the trials had never truly ended. They had only changed shape. By late autumn, the valley simmered like a pot about to boil over. Settlers whispered that Apache war bands gathered in the hills. The tribe whispered that Vernon Briggs was calling ranchers and drifters to his cause. Elias Boone could feel the tension in every sunrise. One evening, scouts returned with grim news. A cabin near the river had been burned. A settler family barely escaped. Tracks showed no Apache presence, only the boots of Briggs's hired men. But the story spreading through town blamed the tribe. Around the council fire, voices rose in anger. Tahoe stood, his scar catching firelight. "This is what comes of patience. Every lie burns us deeper. We should strike first, burn Briggs's ranch before he burns more of ours." Warriors pounded their spears against the ground in agreement. Elias's chest tightened. He knew Briggs had staged the attack to provoke exactly this response. "If you strike," Elias said firmly, "you'll give him what he wants. Settlers will see fire and smoke, and they'll believe his lies. Tahoe rounded on him, eyes blazing. You speak like a coward, Boone. Always words, never action. Do you even bleed for these people you claim as family? The insult cut deep. Elias rose, meeting Tahoe eye to eye, despite the warrior's imposing size. I bled when I fought Carter. I bled when I stood against 12 armed men in town. I'll bleed again if I have to, but not for Briggs's trap. The council fell silent. Even Chief Nalish studied Elias with unreadable eyes. Finally, he spoke. Perhaps it is time for a trial between you and Tahoe. Let strength and loyalty decide whose path we follow. Gasps rippled around the circle. Elias's stomach knotted. This wasn't just a challenge. It was judgment on his place in the tribe. The trial was set for dawn. As Elias lay awake in the lodge that night, Ayana sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his. Tahoe's anger blinds him, but his loyalty to our people is real. If you defeat him, it must be with respect. Do not humiliate him. Show him why we chose you. Kamama leaned close, her voice fierce but tender. Remember what you learned in the first trials. Strength comes with wisdom, courage with mercy. Show them you carry all of it. At sunrise, the entire tribe gathered in the clearing. Tahoe stepped into the circle, stripped to the waist, muscles rippling like coiled rope. Elias entered opposite him, heart hammering, but strangely calm. This wasn't about winning a fight. It was about proving he belonged. The drums began. Tahoe lunged first, driving Elias back with raw power. Each strike was heavy as a hammer. Elias staggered, but he remembered Ayana's whisper. Find the weakness. He sidestepped, letting Tahoe's momentum work against him, just as he had done with Carter. The two men grappled, dust rising around them. Elias's arms screamed with effort, but he held on, forcing the bigger warrior off balance. With a final surge, he twisted, sending Tahoe crashing into the dirt. Silence. Then, slowly, Elias released him and stepped back, breathing hard. Yield, brother, he said. Not because you are weak, but because together we are stronger against the true enemy. Tahoe glared up, chest heaving. Then, with a grunt, he struck his fist to the ground in surrender. The council erupted in chants, their voices echoing across the valley. Elias extended his hand. After a tense pause, Tahoe clasped it. Respect had been earned. But even as relief washed through him, Elias saw smoke curling in the distance. The horizon glowed red. Briggs had made his move. The smoke thickened as Elias Boone, Ayana and Kamama crested the ridge with Tahoe and a dozen warriors at their side. Below, Briggs's men rode in a loose formation, rifles slung, torches burning. They had already put fire to 2 haystacks and were circling toward the settlement. Chief Nalish raised his hand, signaling for silence. Today we defend not just land, but truth, he said. Briggs burns to force war. We will meet him with more than fire. Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding. Let me talk first. If they see us waiting with weapons, they'll believe every lie he's told. The chief nodded, though his eyes carried the weight of risk. Elias rode down into the valley alone, dust curling around his horse's hooves. He raised his empty hands high, the early sun painting his figure in gold. Briggs spotted him and barked a laugh. Look who crawls out from hiding, the rancher who thinks he's an Apache. Put down your torches, Elias called out, his voice steady. We all know you staged the river fire. You killed Williams. You've been feeding lies to stir this fight. The mob wavered, but Briggs's sneer grew sharper. Lies? That stone your woman carried was proof enough. Graves robbed, gold stolen, settlers murdered. Then explain this, Elias said. He pulled from his coat a folded sheet, the confession Samuel Garrett had given before Captain Morton weeks earlier, delivered to the council by Joseph Crow Feather. Elias read aloud, his words carrying over the valley. Garrett's testimony named Briggs as the man who paid him to blame the tribe for Williams's death. The men behind Briggs shifted uneasily. A few lowered their torches. One even spat in the dirt, muttering. Briggs' face flushed crimson. You think a piece of paper changes anything? These people will never live in peace beside us. He yanked his pistol free and aimed at Elias. Before Elias could move, an arrow whistled from the ridge, knocking the pistol from Briggs's hand. Tahoe stood tall above, bow still raised. The sight of Apache warriors forming along the ridge broke what remained of Briggs's support. His hired men scattered, unwilling to die for a cause built on lies. Briggs staggered back, fury boiling into desperation. You'll regret this, Boone. You'll regret siding with them. He turned to flee, but Ayana and Kamama stepped into his path, tall as towers, their presence enough to halt him cold. You sought to buy us as property, Ayana said, her voice like iron. But no man owns our spirit. Kamama added, your greed nearly brought war to this valley. That ends today. They held Briggs long enough for Captain Morton's patrol, summoned by smoke signals hours earlier, to arrive. Soldiers bound him, the captain reading charges of fraud, incitement, and conspiracy. When the dust settled, the tribe and settlers gathered in a circle on the very ground Briggs had meant to divide. Chief Nalish placed the sacred stone in the center, its markings gleaming in the firelight. This holds the memory of our ancestors. It will never again be twisted into a map for greed. From this day, it stands for unity. Elias stepped forward, Ayana and Kamama at his sides. This valley is our home. All of us. We can keep fighting until it's ash and bones, or we can build something worth protecting together. For the first time, silence carried hope instead of fear. Heads nodded, hands extended. The choice had been made. 6 months later, Elias Boone stood at the edge of fields once barren, now thriving with Apache planting methods. Children of both peoples played together near the stream. His ranch, once broken, pulsed with life. Ayana's hand slipped into his. Kamama leaned against his shoulder, her smile warm as the sun. He wasn't just a rancher anymore. He was husband, protector, bridge. Sometimes destiny arrives not in grand victories, but in the moment you choose to stand your ground. And Elias Boone had chosen well.